which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Here. Steve Ballard.
Here.
Debbie Mills
Here.
Lori Summers.
Here.
Denise Winfrey.
Here.
Mark Ferry.
Here.
Chairman Tom Weigel.
Here. We have minutes from May 8th. Any additions or corrections? We have a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. New business. First item is the appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I've been told that this needs to be removed from our agenda. The Planning and Zoning Commission reheard this, but they haven't notified the petitioner, and he has not confirmed that he wants to appeal it at this time. So I have a motion to remove this from the agenda. Second. Motion second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Second item is case ZC 18026, special use permit for keeping horses. Jessica, can you give us an update?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Zoning case ZC-18-026 takes place in Creek Township. The applicant is requesting a special use permit in order to keep horses, livestock, other animals on the property. It is currently zoned R1, so that use does require a special use permit. It was heard June 5th in the Planning and Zoning Commission. There were no objectors present, and the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously voted for approval of that special use permit.
Okay. Any comments by committee? We have a motion to approve.
Move. Second.
Motion second. Any objectors to this? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case, ZC 17054, requesting a map amendment C2 to R5.
I have a question. And from these next two, I'm not seeing where these were cut unless I'm missing something.
Janine, could you give an update?
Oh, the location?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, so they're in Joliet Township. They're on East Cass Street, 1427 East Cass and 1429. Both ZC 17054 and ZC 17056. It's the same applicant, and they're represented by an attorney, Timothy McGrath. The applicant owns both properties. It is currently zoned commercial. It is not used for commercial purposes. It's an improvement to single-family residences. Their intent is to rezone. They got variances approved at the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. Just variances associated with the existing structures, setbacks, rear yard setback, street setback. Again, never really used for commercial purposes, but our zoning maps had them as C2 commercial. So for reasons of wanting to sell the property, and it makes more sense for them to be residential since they're improved with residential structures, the applicant is pursuing a map amendment.
Okay. So our first case, ZC 17054, we have a motion to approve.
Move.
Second. Second. Any objectors to this change? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case, ZC 17056, is map amendment C2 to R5. This is the same property.
So this is an adjacent property.
Okay.
Same owners, same.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
Question?
Yeah, I just have questions. So we're going from the side yard setback from 5 feet down to less than a foot. And I'm assuming that it's the same, the side yard is attached to the same, so that's why we want to go to such a small amount.
So the variances were stopped at the Planning and Zoning Commission and were approved, so this board only approves the map amendment. So the variances were already addressed for existing structures.
All right, thank you.
Any objectors to this change? Okay, we have a motion to approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case, ZC ZCC 18016, special use permit for keeping of animals. Give us an update.
So this case takes place in Jackson Township on Lunch Lane. The applicants are Kenneth and Carol Palmer. They're represented by Thomas Osterberger. Again, they're requesting a special use permit to keep more than 6 companion animals to operate an animal rescue on a property that is in the process of being developed with a single-family residence. You do have a memo there from the Village of Elwood. So the Village of Elwood first heard this case by planning and zoning for their village. On June 6th, their village board voted 5-0 to recommend to our Will County Board that they have no objections to the special use permit, provided that 2 conditions be added. The first one, the applicant not be allowed to have more than 15 dogs, and that the animals must be kept indoors from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So our staff has addressed those 2 issues. One of the conditions simply states that animals must be kept indoors overnight. So the committee, if they do want to specify hours, they could. But 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. appears to be overnight. The second condition, our condition reads no more than 15 companion animals, including cats and dogs. In the second memo that I provided for you, the applicant has requested that we exclude cats from that calculation, which would indicate an unlimited number of cats. So he did provide some supporting documentation related to the noise levels from barking dogs that you can review there. So he's requesting for cats to be excluded. The committee could add an additional condition, one that addresses dogs, one that addresses cats, and modify those amounts.
Okay, you've given us a memo here to add condition number 5, no more than 15 dogs may be kept and cared for. This excludes dogs privately owned by the applicant.
Includes, does not exclude, it includes, yes.
Okay.
So that is the applicant's suggested condition that does remove cats entirely from being regulated. So again, we could add a condition that specifies cats in similar language, no more than however many cats, and we can allow the applicant to speak to what he feels may be an appropriate amount.
But they don't want cats?
They do keep cats. They just don't want that to be included with the 15. They would like to have 15 dogs at a maximum.
What's the maximum for cats?
Right now, it's included 15 cats or dogs. So you can have 5 dogs, 10
Total of
cats.
15 animals.
Total of 15 animals. The applicant requests that we exclude cats. So the committee can add 15 dogs, 5 cats. 10 dogs, whatever you feel. I just request that maybe the applicant speak to the operations of his animal rescue and what would be appropriate or what his plans are.
Is the applicant here? No.
His attorney is.
Could you give us a heads up on how many cats we have?
Good morning, Tom Osterberg, 111 North Ottawa Street, on behalf of the applicant Ken and Carol Palmer. The way this came down was Mr. Palmer went to Elwood Planning and Zoning Commission, and they suggested 15. Jessica probably correctly said, yeah, that seems like a good number. He then went back to the board, and they said that because they were concerned about noise. So he then went back to the village board, subsequent to our PCC meeting, and explained to them that he had some additional cats, and so they said, sure, 15 dogs is what we were talking about. If you had to limit the number of cats, I think 10 would be, he has a handful of house cats, they don't go out, so we're just looking to not hurt that 15 number because of cats.
So the rescue is just dogs.
Correct.
Oh, they're not going to rescue.
We're not rescuing cats. We're just pets.
So we could add a condition that we could have up to 10 cats.
That would be great, thank you.
Okay.
But we don't have to put a condition in for cats. He lives on a 10-acre parcel, he's in a rural area. I just know people dump cats all the time. I end up with a very amount of cats on my farm from time to time. So if he just has pet cats, why do we want to limit pet cats at all? I think we don't put any restriction on it. If it's a cat rescue, that would be different. Maybe we don't want 30 or 50 cats next door to us, but
Well, if we're silent on it, they can still have cats.
So the special use permit then would allow for companion animals, but limit the total number of dogs to 15 and be silent on cats, correct, Jessica?
So should the applicant want to operate as cat rescue, the special use permit doesn't change. He operates his request is an animal rescue, so he could rescue cats. It doesn't, the companion animal definition includes all companion animals, so cats and dogs.
yeah.
So it might be helpful to add cats versus excluding them, because he could, if he wanted to, he could have 30 cats. I don't think that's his intention, but, you know, he could.
Again, cats, they don't bark.
Yeah.
No, but they can be noisy.
They can be noisy.
They can be, yes, they can.
Well, why don't we just say 10 cats? Nobody's going to go out and count them.
I'm okay with it, 15 dollars.
So if we don't put a restriction of anything on cats, he can have as many kids as he wants. I don't care about cats. Yeah, he put
I can wake up with a
if he's
new cat.
rescuing, he's gonna get those darn things fixed somehow, man.
If they have wild ones to show up, if they're nice. I'm okay with saving cats, the amount of cats you can save about a dog.
Well, let's say 15 dogs and 15 cats.
That would be great, thank you.
That's fine.
Okay, we have a motion to amend number 5 to include 15 dogs and 15 cats. Motion second. Alan and Lloyd. Okay, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any objections to this proposal? Okay. We'll approve the special use permit as amended. Have a motion? Motion. Or a second?
Second.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, motion
I'm
carries.
gonna be a no. I don't think that we should be a restriction on cats.
Okay. Next item is special use permit for a solar farm. ZC 18009. Jessica, you want to give us an update?
This special use permit is in Manhattan Township. The applicant is Community Power Group, Michael Borkowski. The request is to construct a 2-megawatt solar farm facility on the special use permit area is 22.54 acres. There were no objectors present at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on June 5th. One neighbor did speak out about the project, but did not object to it. None of the agencies that were notified had objections to the special use permit either, including Manhattan Township. The Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously approved with 12 conditions.
Okay, Sam, you want to give us an update from your perspective?
Sure, so this will cover the 3 solar farm cases that are under your review today. So recently, we had a trio of solar farm bills pass in our Illinois Congress, and basically those bills addressed a lot of concerns that objectors had stated regarding all 3 of these solar farm special use permit applications. Some of those are, the state will now require that all solar farm developers provide a decommissioning surety to the county or municipality. So we don't have to condition that, it'll be a requirement of the state. Also, there's a specific process outlined for how to repair a damaged drain tile. The Illinois state law already sets out that if you damage a drain tile, you have to fix it. But this particular piece of legislation outlines what the steps in the process are to properly repair that tile. It also addresses decommissioning, how these systems should properly be decommissioned. Another piece of legislation talks about the assessment value. I know that some folks were worried, if the developer walks away, what is the landowner left with? Well, we have the decommissioning bond in place, and then also Solar farm facilities will now be assigned their own PIN number. So you have the existing land has a PIN, the facility has a PIN number. So let's say the developer decides not to pay taxes. That homeowner, landowner will not be, there won't be a lien on their PIN number for those back taxes. And then the county would have the right to go in and decommission using aforementioned beneficiary that would be provided through the decommissioning surety. The Illinois Farm Bureau is an advocate of this legislation. They thoroughly reviewed it and said that under these conditions, using an AMA, every developer has to submit an agricultural impact mitigation agreement for every project to the Department of Agriculture for review before they can start construction. They said this is a proper use under these conditions, following these guidelines. So I know there was some concern, this is going to permanently damage the soil. Our Illinois Farm Bureau took care to very specifically review how soil will be treated, how the land will be treated. And once that system's removed, all the land goes back to an agricultural zoning, assuming that it's still going to be used for farm purposes. There was also a pollinator-friendly bill that incentivizes developers to take extra care in the vegetation choice they make for the plantings under and around the solar system, such that there aren't any weed mixes in there that will impact neighboring properties. This also encourages our local species to thrive in that area despite the change in the use of that land. There was also some discussion of noise during the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. I now have an exact statistic based on a study done by a university, not by a developer, not for a developer. And this study essentially says when you're standing next to the transformer or an inverter, these are the two pieces of equipment that are going to make any sort of noise because they have fans or they're generating electricity, right? So when you're standing right next to it or 5 feet away, it's about 65 decibels. That's, if I were talking to Jessica, that would be about 65 decibels. For every foot you move away from that piece of equipment, the decibel level audibly for a human decreases by 0.15 decibels. So that means if we want to determine what the noise pollution would be for a nearby property, if we have a resident nearby, we can calculate that distance and then say by the time we're at your front door, the decibel level is X. So that is some of the clarifications I wanted to provide, and the legislation has been passed, it's just waiting signature. So some of the things that were a concern on the part of this committee, on the part of our community, were addressed. And I did speak with our assessor, Rhonda Novak, and she also clarified that the assessment value for each one of these solar facilities per megawatt is $218,000. 64% of property tax revenue approximately in Will County goes to school districts. So that would be, if you have a 2 megawatt solar farm, which is most of what you've been seeing, it's about $270,000 that would be going to the local school district in which that facility is built. That is to address any concern on the part of the committee or on the part of the communities of what the benefit's going to directly be to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions by committee? Judy?
Yes, I do have some questions. So the amount of money from a 2 megawatt solar community solar farm would be $270,000 per community solar farm. That would be in addition.
So that is the tax revenue.
That's the tax revenue.
That would go to school districts specifically. So there's obviously if we have a 2 megawatt solar system, that's $436,000 in tax revenue. 64% of that, or $279,040, will go directly to the local school district.
So I'm just confused. I just need to make sure, so maybe you can verify. So when we're all assessed at whatever amount we're paying, we pay a specific amount. So that my assessment is what I'm taxed on. So if I'm taxed on 400 and whatever you said, the amount that would go to the school district would be less because it's whatever the rate is for.
That is correct. So that we're waiting for our legislators to determine exactly how that's going to be laid out, and they have about 2 months to do so. So that value will be clarified, but the point I'm trying to provide to the committee is that a substantial amount of that tax revenue, 64%, what is paid, All we have is the assessed value right now, so we'll wait to see what that actually looks like in terms of dollars and cents when the check is written. But 64% of all tax revenue will go directly to that respective school district.
Right, so that's a significant increase versus the ag assessed value that's getting now. So for
Absolutely.
the school districts, and I know Crete Money School District has a very high tax amount, that would significantly help that. I have several other things I want to address. I had, sometime after last meeting, had a tenant farmer come and have a comment about what happens to his crop that currently has planted. Have you looked into that at all?
So it depends on the lease. I have seen some leases where if crop is damaged or if you plant and then the diligence period is lesser than initially thought and they go in and start construction and same thing, you have crop loss, there's a compensation value per acre of crops damaged. This is a unique situation in that the owner of the land is not, I shouldn't say unique, it's fairly common, but in the lease that I'm looking at, it's unique because I haven't seen it before. The homeowner or the landowner is not planting or harvesting the land, it's a tenant. So what I said to that tenant actually who came to Planning and Zoning Commission was it's very important going forward, hindsight, that when negotiating as a recommendation, you include or ask to include in your lease with a landowner if there is some sort of compensation for crop damage as relates to solar farms or other matters that I'm not aware of, that compensation be given to the tenant, but I advise that I can't replace an attorney. They really should have an attorney look over that particular lease, but if you're looking to compensate crop damages going forward as relates to solar farms, since this is a new development to our area, that's something that one may consider.
I would think if you're a smart tenant farmer, you should have that in because it could be anything due to flooding, a drought, what have you. You should have some sort of thing in there so that if there's anything that comes back to the owner and crop damages would go to the tenant farmer. So you should definitely do that. But I'm glad that you're recommending that they do that and would be renegotiating going forward. I have another question. I think you guys have answered it before, but I just want to hear again. Our special use permit remains in place for how long?
So the special use permit needs to be established within a year's time. The applicant does have the ability to request 2 extensions of 180 days each, which would give them another year. And from our conversations with the developers, they likely won't be establishing these within a year. So those that do continue on and do want to develop will be in front of the board, the committee again, requesting for an extension.
Okay.
Oh,
It's forever.
oh, the actual, the lease agreement?
The special use permit.
Oh, forever until it's abandoned.
So it's in place forever until it's abandoned. I know that I was in a meeting and ComEd was there and they happened to mention that whatever I forget the terminology, but whatever they do is only good for 12 months. So if for some reason the solar company does not get the designation from the state lottery for the energy credits, then within 12 months it expires. So our permit doesn't do that in any respect. They could just continuously have this until they're able to move forward with it.
Let me clarify that. Special use permit, when they apply for it in the application, there's a designation on there that says that they have to make, if they wanted to, what they say, run with the land, and if they don't make that designation, then it doesn't run with the land. So they have to clarify from the get-go whether or not they want the special use permit to go forward.
So when we approve the special use permit here, is that designated at that point or no?
I don't know, because I haven't seen the application,
Thanks for additional clarification. Once it's developed, they can run with the land. But you have to execute the special use within 12 months. If you don't execute in 12 months, you have to then ask for, you can ask for like a 180-day extension twice. So you got 2 years. If it's not built within 2 years, that's if the extensions are granted, that special use is no longer valid. That's correct. That's what you were asking, I think, right?
That's correct, because I wanted to know, because like I said, ComEd eliminates it after a year if they haven't got, they get in the lottery, everybody gets in the lottery, and if they don't get selected, then we would have that,
I
okay.
mean, I think a lot of people are getting as many sites as they can. Because my understanding of those incentives, first batch will get the biggest incentive, and it's going to diminish after that, so.
Right, that's my understanding as well. Okay, I have another question. So then, with the tax assessment, since the solar, the designated area for the solar farm has a different PIN number, which is a good thing if that happened, then if they go belly up and it comes on the county then the bonding is there from the landowner's bonding, or?
All the legislation says right now is that a suitable financial assurance that is approved by the Department of Ag. So whatever the Department of Ag has been accepting for wind farms would likely be acceptable now for solar farms. I haven't worked with wind farms, but my assumption would be that it is some sort of corporate bond.
Okay, and that would be, the corporate bond would be with us then, or with the landowner?
So it would be with, we'd be named as a beneficiary.
Okay.
It has to be approved by the Department of Ag. So they have to say, yes, this is suitable, given the necessary decommissioning that would be required for the system. And then if they walked away, weren't paying taxes, the property would be lien. If it wasn't operational for, I believe it's 12 months, it says in our zoning ordinance, then we would have the right to go in and decommission the system.
Okay, thank you. And I just have one more question. You mentioned about that pollinator bill, so I was just curious. I know that in our landscaping list of things to select from, there's certain things. Does this list include these type of pollinator plants, or do we have to add those?
Some of them are native grasses that you wouldn't consider necessarily a pollinator plant. Some of them are considered pollinator plants. What I will be doing is they're going to be coming out with a list of suggested mixes, and that will be, they have 6 months to do that, so it might be some time. But we will post this legislation for review and share it if asked. That way they can do their own research in the meantime if they like to try and identify. If they wish to pursue that designation, the legislation doesn't require them to. It just gives them the opportunity to do so.
Right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions by committee? Okay, can we have a motion to approve?
Motion?
Your second?
Second.
Second?
So I have a comment about the solar farm.
Other comments?
Yeah, the rest was all like generic. So this is the question I have. So my understanding is that Manhattan and Wilton Township Highway Commissioners, the Village of Manhattan and the Manhattan Fire District have all been notified of this specific one at Kankakee Street and I think Offner, but yet they made no comments. Have you heard anything from them? Have you heard anything from them? That's your district?
No.
So,
Yeah, they didn't come to the, I think it's zoning meeting. That's where I usually see if they didn't come there, and I haven't heard enough objections. One resident who was objecting to the noise, that was it. And even that, I think you should look at maybe additional screening around the transformers or inverters to, you know, dissipate some of that. I mean, there's some other things you can do with landscaping. But anyway, no.
So do we address like the noise issue? Usually those transformers, my understanding is they're putting them in sort of the middle of it, so it's not near the perimeter.
So we have 3 solar farm cases ahead of you this evening. This is the only one that didn't have objectors, and this is the only one that is in Manhattan Township. The township didn't object to it either. So you'll see there's a difference for the other 2. So there aren't any conditions to address noise. There are conditions to address landscaping. So landscaping is going to be provided. And each site is a little bit more unique at the road frontage for all of them. If they're in a corner, they have 2. So this one was one of those, there were no changes to the conditions. Some of the other 2, there were some changes that I'll note.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any objectors to the solar farm in Manhattan Township? Okay, no objectors. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next case is a solar farm on Offner Road. Jessica, you want to give us some updates?
ZC-18-010 is the same developer, Community Power Group. This property is in Monee Township. It's on the northeast corner of Illinois Route 50 and West Offner Road. It's a 2 megawatt solar farm facility on an approximately 30.134 acre special use permit area of the entire parcel. There were several objectors at the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. None of the agencies that were notified objected to the special use permit request, including Monee Township. The Planning and Zoning Commission ultimately approved the special use permit request 5-1. So there was one member who did not approve the special use permit.
Okay, any questions by committee? Okay, are there any objectors to this? Okay, if you'd like to come down one at a time to the podium. State your name, please.
My name is Wayne Ruger. We have the 40-acre parcel of farm ground that's located on Offner Road directly across from the possible development. It's been in the family for about 60 years. And I am opposed to constructing a solar farm, not because I'm against solar energy, but the location that it's going to be built on. Some of the reasons I gave each of you a 13-page packet. Believe me, I don't intend to go through that packet, so forth, but there's some things in there that are really important, I feel. Other things would be it's right next to Raccoon Grove Forest Preserve. And, there's been hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money to develop and maintain it. The proposed building site, which is connected right to the Raccoon Forest Preserve, there's approximately, and I have not counted them all, but there's approximately 750 trees, bushes, shrubs on that property. Now, they aren't giant 12-inch trees. They're 2, 4, 6-inch type of trees. That would be totally bulldozed and cleaned up. Although this site is not part of Raccoon Grove, it's a natural extension. Natural growth of trees, grass, bushes, which provide some of the same environment that Raccoon Grove provides. For all forms of animal life, have food and safe haven. The current site has no hazards, no soil erosion problems. It causes no flooding or possible pollution to the water supply and land. That report that I gave you there is not for or against solar farms. It's just to get us to think very carefully of how we're going to use that land. Because it's not like just putting up an office building and the office building goes bankrupt or whatever and somebody else comes in and takes over that building most likely. Some items to point out, general landscape maintenance is especially critical after installation because of the soil erosion, especially if there's creeks nearby, and there is an active creek very close to this property. Spraying for weeds is a concern for tree and shrub control. can lead to hazardous chemicals leach into our water supply, neighboring wells, which we use for human and animal consumption. Some chemicals may be needed that require special application licenses because of health and environmental risks. Wildlife impact will probably be negatively impacted because you're fencing in 20-some acres or whatever that's no longer available to the deer and all the other animals and so forth. Most solar farms are safe to operate according to what I've read, but potentially toxic heavy metals and silicone byproducts that are used in the production, if these units are damaged or after time, may release these contaminants into our environment. Another thought is the training and safety for our firefighters and first responders in the event of a fire or a vehicle accident, because the site is going to be at a very heavily traffic usage area on Route 50 and Offner Road. High voltage, I'm assuming, is also involved with the hazardous material. Shutting down or decommissioning is a major product and costly. And I was glad to hear that evidently there is some control according to the state and so forth. But many of the materials cannot be disposed of within a landfill and must be recycled at a whole high cost. If the solar farm is allowed to build, my feeling is that the county permit should include a reserve fund requirement to be established with an escrow agent outside of the use and control of the community power group to be used in the decommissioning of the solar farm. Estimated cost of removing equipment and restoring the ground should be determined, and each month dollars put into that fund to go towards removal and cleanup. This should be amortized over a certain number of years. It's one thing to say that we're going to clean it up. The other thing is it takes money to do it. And if it's not there, or if it's been moved from one place to another within the financial area of that corporation, us as taxpayers are going to be paying for that cleanup. So this explains some of my concerns and reasons. I do not feel it's in the proper place for the solar farm, and I would ask and suggest to the committee that they do more research and investigate this particular site before allowing it to move forward. We owe it to our area residents, the animal life, the environment that we're trying to protect and clean up. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity, and I won't take any more of your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else to talk about this? State your name, please.
My name is Millie Zittima. I live on 5901 West Offner Road. I'm next door to Wayne. And I'm sorry I did not make the meeting that they had last week. But I am opposed for that solar farm. And not because of the solar farm itself. I think it's a good resource, but I don't think this is the right location. I think that they could get better locations that are similar in industrial areas, maybe parking lots on top of buildings, but I don't understand why they would take prime farmland or the beauty of farmland there, or it is in, I think, a CRP program right now with the trees. And the location of that property off of 50 and off of there, it's prime location. Why would you make it industrial? We do not have industrial facilities around that unless you go into Moni. This is surrounded by ag land, and I just don't think that it's proper. As Wayne stated about the habitat, it may endanger habitat. There's a creek running through there, and that creek also goes to my property. And then also the concern about well water. We drink that well water, so I don't know what the repercussions can be about that. I would think that when the board would okay this, they would look at similar locations, similar property, and there is nothing similar to that solar farm around the area. You're putting industrial usage into ag surrounding areas. That area is still recovering from the Ileana Expressway coming through, that they were proposing that, and also from the airport. We're finally seeing progress. People are starting to build again, and now we have this too. You know, so how many times are we going to be hit with different things in that area? And I think I heard that someone mentioned about revenue. Well, if you put that on that, in that area, I'm sure that the property values will decrease. Myself, we have our home there and a farm, and I would say that that would decrease the value of my home. You would be getting increase in revenue for taxes, but then while the surrounding areas may decrease in the value, then will the people's taxes go down? I doubt it. But yet, if we would try to sell our homes, who's going to want to buy a property next to a solar farm? I would ask each one of you, would you want a solar farm next to your house? And then they also, Wayne had a very good point about the cleanup when the solar farm is done with the lease. What guarantee is there going to be that is going to be cleaned up, or is it just going to be abandoned? I think if it was approved, and I hope it's not, that there would be some type of escrow account guaranteeing that there would be a cleanup of that entire solar farm. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to refer right back to you, Samantha. From what you presented to us today, my understanding is there will be a fund for decommissioning, correct?
Yes, County Board Member Summers, it will be required as part of the AMA. They have to submit an assurance that would be approved just like you would for a wind farm. And again, we don't know exactly what that looks like yet. They have 60 days to finalize what that looks like, but if we're turning to wind farms, most likely escrow account or corporate bond.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a question with that. As far as that goes, if the Illinois Department of Ag is going to be the one to make sure we have some sort of surety bond or something like that, that is not in place right now, correct?
Correct. So they have 60 days to put out the AMA. What has not been clarified, what we could look into is if it will be required for those that have been approved for a special use permit before or at the time of the signing of this act. However, the AMA has to be submitted to the Department of Ag at least 45 days before construction begins. So realistically, most of these, if they end up getting their incentives in a perfect world, everything lines up where they can actually build out the project. Probably won't see much construction until early 2019. So we would have to clarify with our legislators that that is the process that's going to be in place. I'm making the assumption that that would be the case.
So, but based on that assumption and everything, my question still is, if we approve the special use permit for what we have today, that is not part of it.
Well, this would be under state law. So state law would require us to comply with those standards. Because our special use permit conditions, and Brian or David could confirm this, don't override what is required by state law.
Okay, so if it's approved prior to the state law, the state legislation becoming actual law, because it's not actual law right now, do they get grandfathered into before, or do they must all comply now?
I would ask if you all have seen experience with that. before. When I looked at the legislation, I didn't see any retroactive language, but I also didn't say anything that said about grandfathering either.
But if there's no retroactive language, then it questions whether they would be held to that.
I'm going to look into that right now. See if I can find something.
And if they pass a state law, they have to comply with the state law no matter if they're going forward on a project.
That's exactly what David and I have been discussing. So, in general, yes, you're correct. There's a state law out there, those are the minimums. I want to make sure before I comment on that, though, that I've seen the proposed language, because I don't know specifically what it says. Sometimes they'll put language in the legislation that says that it's going to be retroactive, applicable to anybody who's got one. Sometimes there might be language in there that says that there are certain minimum requirements that everybody has to comply with regardless. They could say that it's effective from this point forward, excluding others. I don't know. I don't want to comment, but you're correct. For the most part, in general, the state law is the minimums, so you've got to comply with what state law requires.
Well, they won't be building for another 2 years, so by that time, the state law is supposed to be in place. Isn't that right, Sam?
I just want to, my microphone's, oh, there we go. It does say, I'm looking at the synopsis as introduced, it does say effective immediately on the final version. So if that is signed into law, that will be effective immediately. So what that reads to me is, if it hasn't already begun construction, you have to submit that AMA, and everything that is included is a requirement of the AMA.
Okay, so
Is that, yeah. I don't see anything that says if you got a special use permit before the signing of this act that you would be exempt.
And that's what I'd be looking for.
but it doesn't say anything, right? So we don't know.
Well, if that's what the law is, and it's kicked into effect, and it's applicable immediately, then wherever you're at, you're going to have to comply.
So even though we approve a special use permit, if you would approve a special use permit today, that would still apply to this specific, any of the...
Again, I haven't read it. I haven't read it verbatim. So, but my interpretation is from what Sam's telling me and what it says on the proposed legislation, that would be correct.
I don't know if this is the same or not, but in the landfill world, when it goes to siting, and there are certain regulations, and the board or whoever approves that. Later on, there's a law that passes that you can't take this into the landfill, or you can't do that, or you got to operate a certain way. That law applies immediately right then, whether it's federal, state, whatever it is. So it doesn't matter, I don't believe, and I mean, that's just the, if I'm looking at it from that standpoint, the law is the law. You've got to apply, you've got to comply with it. You can't just say, well, that law passed after my citing. Well, no, Waste Management in our case, we have to make sure that they complied with the law, whatever the law was at the time, because that landfill may last 30 years. Anyway, I'm just giving you an example where I believe it doesn't matter, the law at the time they have to comply with, unless there's a grandfather clause.
Any other questions by committee?
No, so I just want to say, so one of my main concerns that I've said all along is for the decommissioning plan, and the statement was that the landowner would hold the decommissioning bond. My concern was if the landowner had that bond, and at that point we didn't have the assessment, we didn't know the assessment, we didn't know we were going to get another PIN for the solar farm itself. So now that the solar farm has its own PIN, the landowner would not be, there would be no tax lien against it, which means now this parcel could maybe potentially not be decommissioned, which then it falls on the county, which I said I was worried about all along. So now if it falls on the county, I just want to make sure that it is retroactive so that we are not stuck with a potential solar farm that we have to decommission, and we do get salvage value, of course, but the cost could be so much higher because then we, as a county, if we're decommissioning, we have to pay all the prevailing wage rates that an individual would not be held liable to do. That's my concern.
Absolutely, and from what I am reading, I can't find anything that says grandfather or retroactive. So If it says effective immediately and they haven't constructed the facility, which I sincerely doubt you'll see any construction begin in 2018, because the incentives aren't even, the awards won't be announced until the end of December. So with that said, I would say similar to like speed limit changes, if you own a car, it doesn't matter when you got the car, when the speed limit changes, you have to comply. So I think that that would be a good argument for why this should comply. If it would make the committee and the board feel more assured, I would say must comply with SB 2591 regardless of special use permit approval date. I don't know if that's the correct language, I don't know if that can be done, or you could say with the language in the proposed bill, so if it didn't get signed, they would still have to follow this sort of method, which has already been approved by a lot of the stakeholder groups who've been involved in this process. That's one of the only solutions I could think of while we're in the limbo state of everything being perfectly spelled out.
So I would like to hear from Matt on that, because he's our attorney.
I can't give you a definitive answer on something because this could be a challenge in court too. I mean, it's, you know what I mean? But from my interpretation, from what I'm hearing, if this is effective immediately, what I would be looking for in reading that legislation would be some exclusionary language, what you're calling the grandfathering language. And then there was also pointed out that this is state law. Enforcement purposes wouldn't fall on the county for this as well. This would be something that the state would be enforcing. But with regards to the language itself, if it's saying effective immediately, I do not see any exclusionary language. Dee hit it on the head as well, talking about when you have new legislation that comes into effect, they have to comply. My interpretation, again, I haven't read the whole thing, is that yes, they would have to comply with whatever is in there, regardless of whether they receive a special use permit.
Any other questions by committee? Any other objectors to this site?
Hi. Sorry, I stepped down.
Come down to the podium.
Thank you.
State your name, please.
Hello, my name is Maria Abney, and I am a resident of Monique. I am an abutting neighbor. I live at 27640 South Egyptian Trail Road. I think, if nothing else, this discussion that Mr. Reuter brought up some great points shows that this is a complex endeavor. And an endeavor that I think the board and Community Solar coming into the county are taking on at a very fast clip. 4 proposed solar farms, and again, like the others, I'm not against solar farm. I'm not against solar energies. I think they're great, and I actually support them. But it is a complex endeavor, and it's one that requires a lot of thought. And now there's a 5th solar farm being looked at in Monique. That's not what we're here to discuss about today. But again, these are large, multi-million-dollar and a multi-billion-dollar industry. There are residents that are impacted, and we need to think about how we're approaching this rollout and why are we looking at 4 all at once. One of the points I'd like to stress today, and I want to beseech the board to consider, is have we ever looked at a staggered approach? I think anybody that is in charge or has managed or been on a committee with large projects will tell you that you can garner a lot of information, a lot of experience, a lot of mistakes, a lot of efficiencies if you do take a staggered approach. And again, in this particular instance of Raccoon Grove, the Offner and 50 location, we're talking about a natural habitat, and I'll speak to that briefly as to how that habitat was created. In 2001, the prior landowner, Miss Lillian Fleming, worked with the federal government to acquire prairie restoration dollars. 44,000 trees were planted on that 133-acre parcel as part of the larger farm that was broken up that we talked about into the tracts, the 3 tracts that are being looked at for the solar farm. So we have federal dollars, tens of thousands of dollars that went into restoring this, and Whether it was by purpose at that time, or by coincidence, or by fate, you created a habitat there. And it is next to Raccoon Grove Forest Preserve. It is across the street from the Moni Water Reservoir. We're talking about 500 acres of protected lands and animals that have moved in, birds that have moved in a 17-year period. Now we're going to bulldoze that, put down 7,857 solar panels that do have some toxic chemicals in them. There are lubricants that go into the moving mechanism, so whether it's the actual content of the panel or the lubricants, we have heard from staff reports that no water reports are being done. We are on well water. We have people like myself that own Rock Creek, a part of it, as well as the prior testimony giver, Ms. Sigma, who also owns part of Rock Creek. What is the water runoff? Since we are tenant water neighbors, or in a position of tenant water flow. So these are some of the things that, again, I can't stress to you enough. I have a quote from a very ethical solar company, and I want to also touch on that briefly. And this is what they say, and again, I'm not against these solar farms. I'm against this particular location and some of the others that are very sensitive. They are what is called and deemed in the industry as a non-optimal site. And this is the quote from this solar company. We've spoken to thousands of individuals about community solar, and many have expressed concerns that solar installations could take useful land out of commission or cause harm to the environment. They point to solar farms that are planned on active farmland, nature reserves, or in land that is home to sensitive ecosystems. They're not wrong. It's not environmentally friendly to clear cut a forest for a solar farm, as some solar companies have done. Thankfully, there are plenty of sites that are already suitable for solar farms, like capped landfills, Superfund sites, or fallow agricultural land. These solar projects make use of otherwise unusable land and provide much needed revenue to municipalities, farmers, and other stakeholders. So again, we are not wrong. Let me stress that. This is a solar company that, again, is a leading ethical solar company in the industry. And I can provide that name after this meeting if that's of interest. Moving on, I also want to stress a couple of other points. Going back to the history of this land and the water quality. We are concerned that, again, and we're pleading with you that at least a quarter of these 4 proposed solar farms, or now 3, I guess is what we're looking at today here, that they be looked at in terms of putting them on a pause or kind of a staggered approach so that we can actually examine and consider wisely what toxins are involved. And also, what can we do to protect ourselves? Water studies, property value studies, nature and other studies that have not been done. Furthermore, I guess speaking to the timeline, is there a timeline that the public is unaware of, I guess, for these funds or for these projects? It seems like 3 of these farms kind of going through all at once. Is there some timeline that we're not aware of in terms of funding or dollars that are running out? I don't know.
So what I understand, it was at a meeting last night, Comment was there to explain some of that. One of the things is there's a lottery that's going on right now that will be released, I think, in January is what they're expecting. So if they get in line for that lottery, then they could be one of the many chosen. So right now, Comment has a ton of projects in the queue. And of that ton of projects, only a small amount of projects will be selected. Okay? So while we're getting all these different solar companies looking into a solar farm somewhere, community solar farm somewhere, there's only so much money available for that. And so not everyone will go through. But ComEd is looking at it in the sense that they're looking at each project, that this project will be selected, because we don't know what ones will, what ones won't. Nobody does, which is how we're looking at it as well. And so they also said that this amount of money that's been appropriated will run out. But they expect fully that there'll be another 1 to 2 years that more money will be funded through the ComEd, through this green energy plan. FEJA, right, that they will continue to fund. So how much more will they fund, and how many solar farms can that actually maintain? And then, of course, the difference is, too, is that these solar companies want to be the first in line to get it, in a sense, because if they are able to sign up, the transmission lines can handle so much energy. After that, then an upgrade to the infrastructure has to be done, and that would be at the cost of the solar companies, so they want to get it now so that they don't have to pay that cost. So they want to hopefully try and get this first lottery so that they're not ones going down. What I have said, and I think the townships really need to consider it, and I mentioned we haven't had a full discussion of it, is the density. If we have to look at the density, you bring up a very good thing, is the suitable site location. Should we, and we have not had that discussion either, what is a suitable site location, what may not be a suitable site location. What I can tell you, though, also is that this is not speeding through. In Mooney Township, perhaps you feel that way. I have been going around to the different villages and township boards to have a conversation. I've asked for a white paper from our land use department to explain the process so that you're aware of it. But we did have solar farms tabled for a very long time because there was no state legislation for an ag mitigation agreement, nor was there state legislation for decommissioning. So we worked with the land use department, adopted the Illinois Farm Bureau's draft legislation, and then we tweaked it accordingly that we felt was appropriate for Will County. Since we didn't have anything, that's why we were able to approve 3 solar farms last month, because we thought that we had those things covered through an analyte document that we approved, that they agreed to follow, as well as the decommissioning statement. Okay. Since then, the state has passed, both the Senate and House have passed this legislation, but it hasn't been fully signed yet. They have 60 days to make changes or whatever. So we have not gone through this fast. Although you're correct, we have not looked at suitable sites. Are we looking at that? At this point, we haven't had a site that was such as this particular one is. And we have not looked at density. I've said that should really happen at the township level rather than the county government deciding for each individual township. It's my opinion, should determine that themselves versus the county coming in as the big landlord and saying, sure, you should only have so many here. So I just wanted to give you that rundown. We have done that. We have not gone fast. Sam and others on the land use committee have been working very hard at getting all these answers that we've had, and we work closely with the Will County Farm Bureau project manager, Mark Schneiderwin, who is really awesome at looking at these things. We have it so they have to have an ag specialist hired. We have to agree to have an ag specialist hired so that person on site while the process would be built. And the pre-construction. We put a lot of different conditions on them. So this hasn't gone fast. There is no willy-nilly in it. The only things that are correct is that we've not looked at density and we've not looked at appropriate site location versus a different site location. For me, I agree, everything should be in all the brownfields, and where I used to work in Harvey, nothing but brownfields, Chicago Heights, my husband
Now,
worked
don't, you name it, leave them all.
That's my opinion,
Yeah.
but property owners have the right to use their property as they choose.
With special permit.
With special permit, correct.
So that's why we're here. But, no, I appreciate that response, it's helpful, and, you know, I have to say, you know, when you bring up optimal site at the last meeting last week, Chairman Len Balone, I have to applaud him. He echoed some of our comments about this particular location, Offner and 50, not being an optimal site. He was truly the one board member who didn't just hear our words, but listened to them and gave his vote. He was the one that voted against this not being an optimal site or not moving forward. With that said, let's talk about how this has felt so fast, and I'll be brief on this, but I did not receive my certified notification that is required by law. And the reason that was cited was because the property was split or bought December 28th, wherein, you know, Mr. Sloan bought the property the same day I did. We all had this closing day the same day. So my point is, I didn't get the notice. Mr. Jim Wagner, who's a neighboring abutting tenant, did not get the notice. He did not know about the solar farm. He owns, I believe, 4 tracts of land, totaling 40 acres. So if I feel rushed, it's because I've known about this for a couple of weeks, and it's really hard to get awareness out in the community. Some communities, Naperville, others, Tinley Park, very politically active. Monique, you know, a little complacent, a little apathetic. So how could I raise awareness, you know, to the alarms that I have going off in my mind, you know, with a couple weeks of knowledge, you know, in a couple of weeks, you know. I put together a massive research that I presented in these different public hearings. And I'm one person. I don't have staff. I don't have a lawyer, you know, at my disposal or a team of lawyers. You know, this is all me doing this in my time. This is me waking up at 6 a.m. to make, you know, special arrangements to get my kid somewhere where he's not running around over there. So I'm just one person. I'm a neighbor. I was not notified by certified letter. And again, it was told to me, well, we didn't know all the property owners. Well, you have track 7, track 8, 9, 10, 11 in your maps that you're showing to all of us. So don't cite, you know, that as being an excuse. I have a mailbox out there. There was nothing in it. So that's why I feel so rushed and haven't had an opportunity to get as involved as I'd like, but I think I've done pretty good getting in here in the last 2 weeks. So with that said, I'm going to make just one other point here and then I'll close it out. The water ecology and the toxicity, there's been, you know, I don't have the full information on these panels as to what their contents are. I'd like to see that. I'd like to examine the lubricants and what the contents of those are, because again, we have a moving mechanism. These panels are designed to rotate to capture optimal sun throughout the day. I'd like a full rundown on what is in those lubricants, because I'd like that researched. And again, when we're talking about water runoff and also this being in a floodplain partiality, you know, have we talked with the Army Corps of Engineers? Have we done floodwater due diligence? All of that. I don't know. I don't know. I'm one person. And I see no water report in what I've looked at. So I do drink the well water. There are farmers that have their animals drinking the water. And my son plays in the creek. And I want to know if that can still be done or not. Or do I have to not enjoy my property because I have solar farm runoff? And again, I know that solar is a good alternative energy source. I'm very pro-solar. However, not enough due diligence is being done. I didn't get my certified notification. And there's no listening to the public when we're raising these points. They're being brushed aside, say for, you know, Chairman Balone, who voted and heard our plea that this is a non-optimal site. So in closing, I would ask that as representatives, you consider our plea to look at this as not being an optimal site, to look at potentially approaching this as a staggered approach or phased approach so we can learn from the mistakes, because there will be mistakes. But there will also be efficiencies to be learned from rolling it out in a staggered approach. Order them from the least invasive to the most invasive. Save the 500 natural acre wetland and farmland for the last. Why would you put that first, or not even put any thought into the order? That's what I'm beseeching and asking the board members to consider. If this is a runaway train, like the last board told us, our hands are tied, this is all about money. There are quotes you can hear from the minutes of the last board meeting. It's all about money. We heard that. Please look at this being a non-optimal site. Please consider a staggered approach. Please ask these people to do more due diligence on the drinking water effect, on the property value effect. Please, we are asking you, we are pleading with you. And that closes out my comments. Thank you for your time, and thank you for hopefully listening to me today, not just hearing me.
Thank you. Matt, did you have a comment?
I do, and I'm sorry. Okay, so there was, Member O'Gala, you raised a very valid question. It's a very good point. That's why we were looking at it this whole time. We were talking about the applicability of this yet to be passed legislation. And so Sam was kind enough to pull it up. And so as I'm sitting here in this pocket, I'm trying to go through it. And there were a few things that I found that Sam found the main one. First and foremost, there is some language in here that talks about the effectiveness of this particular yet to be passed legislation on people now that are applying for this. And it's at the very end. It's, in fact, it's the last provision of the entire act. And I'm just going to read it if I can. It's the record. It says that nothing in this amendatory act of the 100th General Assembly and nothing in an agricultural impact mitigation agreement shall be construed to apply to or otherwise impair an underlying agreement for a commercial solar energy facility entered into prior to the effective date of this amendatory act of the 100th General Assembly. So essentially what it's saying is that when this is going to pass, it's not going to apply to those that exist now. So the question was, this is what I was researching, is what's an underlying agreement, or an agreement, if you will. So you usually go to the definition provision of an act at the very beginning, and sure enough, it's defined in here. And give me 1 second. The underlying agreement specifically spells out means a written agreement with the landowner, including but not limited to an easement, option, lease, or license, under the terms of which another person has constructed, constructs, or intends to construct a commercial wind energy facility or a commercial solar energy facility on the property of the landowner. So what that's saying is that if someone's got a lease or an option or something right now, and that's not signed and entered into, this proposed language cannot be read to impair or affect that solar energy farm. I hope I was clear. I tried to do that as quick as possible I can.
Shannon, you have a comment?
So what would be an option that is, it's already, if they already have a lease, it doesn't matter if they have a special use permit, this can't apply until after it's signed. Only for those leases that are signed after the law becomes effective. So what could be done technically is you could copy paste the language from the law as a condition to any of these so that you don't have to worry about that provision. And then once it's passed, you would know in the future for any solar farms that the committee and the board chooses to approve, you would not have to add that language condition, which is kind of what happened with the Borrego solar farms, is that the AMA-like document was created and added to those. Thank you.
Judy?
Right, so that's been my concern all along, and I put it out there. I think I'm the only one that is really pressed for that, is that there is a big thing, is what happens if they go belly up? Will they go belly up? I don't really know. Chances are they won't, because solar energy should be producing all the time. But my thing is what happens, and then it falls on the county and we're stuck with it. My opinion is, unfortunately, we passed that the first one, and like go moving forward, even though we passed the first one, I think we should strongly consider either copying it now, making an amendment, or tabling them and doing it for next month. This seems to be...
Well, the first one, if I can speak quickly, that hasn't been passed yet. County board hasn't signed off on it.
Correct. County board hasn't been signed off. Correct.
Just wanted to raise that point.
Right, we haven't signed off, it's just committee approval, I know.
Even if you table them, because these leases were signed before the legislation became effective, or if it becomes effective, assuming it gets signed, it still exempts them. So it depends when the lease was signed, not when the special use permit is issued.
Can we make the condition that they would comply with the Senate bill number that you're referring to?
Yeah, we would, I don't know if you can say, you could probably say what Senate bill, but we'd have to remove that clause that says that, because that's included in that Senate bill. So what could be done is this language could be copied, we could remove those pieces that exempt solar farms based on their lease signing date. We could say at the time of special use permit or whatever is desired, and then it would be called a condition.
Can I ask a question?
Can we do that for the first one
Yes.
too, for the county board, so you have that set for the county board?
Yeah.
So I will work with Jessica and engineer.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
They don't have to have a special use permit to get the lease signed. Is that
That is
correct?
correct.
They can reach out to the property owner, get a lease, and then come to us. So that is, none of that is in our control.
Right, in fact, a developer's not going to come before you asking for a special use permit without a signed lease, because the special use permit has a cost that they're not going to want to incur unless they know they have a consenting landowner.
But at the time that they come to us, we can't cut and paste the language so it's in the special use.
That's right, so we can include it as a condition. We can take it, remove any pieces of the language that reduce the effectiveness of what we're trying to do here, and that way all the provisions that have been discussed and prioritized by the committee and by the board can be included in that special use permit.
And I'm going to suggest that if that is the prerogative here, that that's to be done specifically like that without just making a reference to the Senate bill and such, because we don't know the potential changes in that between now and the time you pass it. So if there's specific language that you guys want in there, staff, cut and paste and put it in there. That way everybody sees stop.
Okay, so I'm thinking we should table these until next month so that we can make sure we know what's in there. Is that true or no?
I don't know how much time the committee wishes to have to review the additional, that would really be a question for Jessica, because it would be added as a condition at county board then, correct?
Right.
So it would be included in the county board packet. I don't know how much time board members wish to have to review it. That would be, I would refer to.
Well, one of the problems is if we're going to do this for the first one that's passed, we have to put it in the county board packet. We can't table that one, because if we do, it goes as we just passed it. So we have to include the stuff that you're talking about right now. We have to have that for the county board packet. So it's not a matter, we can't table it for another time. We can table other ones, but not that one.
So you could include the condition for the two that haven't been voted on if your intent is to approve. And then for the first one, you would refer it back to committee, correct? And then that one would have to wait until next month. So you would vote it down, refer back to committee, and it would come back.
So I think to give time to kind of address all these concerns, if you table these two, the one that is continuing to the entire board could be referred back to committee for this reason, to address the drafted language.
Just to rehash, not to rehash and go over the whole thing, I think you're probably going to want to hear from the applicant, because I have a feeling the applicant's going to agree and consent to any of these conditions that we're talking about.
Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Would you like to come down and address anything that the residents have said?
Yeah, there may be some more comment period. So after they go, there's a couple more people I think that want to speak.
Okay.
I don't want to jump the process.
All right. Did you want to speak, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
You want to come down to the podium? Okay, go ahead.
Hi. While she's coming down, I have a question for staff attorney. Throughout all this, we hear optimal site and non-optimal site. Is there a definition of an optimal site? Or is that just...
That would be based on interpretation of what the highest and best use of the land is by definition of really yourselves.
Okay.
in making this determination. There is no definition in our ordinance. That is why these special use permits come before you for consideration to determine is this the best use for appropriate.
And then I think that what would go along with that, just to make my mind clear, is when you have more than one of these, as we do, and you get one with no objections, or hardly, one with a lot, do we have to be careful why we say one's approved and one's not? So we're keeping somewhat the same standards, or no?
Are you referring to the conditions that apply to the various
Yeah.
cases? So they've been very consistent since the passing of the ordinance, and the one that was passed prior to the ordinance, just because of timing, was conditioned to reflect what the ordinance that was passed was going to include. And Jessica stepped away, but she could speak to this further. The one thing that you'll notice may vary is the landscaping from case to case, because the geography is different, and there we go. So that would be the biggest discrepancy. There's a couple discrepancies in the one that was passed before the ordinance, but nothing fundamental. They really all have been conditioned very similarly.
And I'm sorry, ma'am, one more question I have is, I guess if the committee decides we're going to approve this one but not this one, is there, we can do that just willy-nilly?
Absolutely.
For no reason. Okay, that's, I think, is what I'm asking. Just, well, attorney.
Well, Matt might have better language.
I think there is something there, is there not?
I just don't like the willy-nilly language.
Well, if it would be willy-nilly, but I mean, we don't have to have a overriding reason, or we would have to have an overriding reason.
Well, there's language that staff has addressed in the reports that talks about the considerations as to what you're supposed to consider, what you're supposed to look at. That's what case law has talked about.
Right.
You should consider. But provided you guys are giving a rational purpose or a rational reason for why you're doing what you're doing, I think that's what's going to be required here. But I would strongly suggest that, looking at the staff reports that they prepared, they spend a lot of time, a lot of effort in these. And they've gone through the analysis that our code of ordinances require, that the state statutes require, and ultimately, should it go to litigation, what I have to deal with in my
Right,
court.
and that's where I'm kind of going with this.
Yeah. I think the staff reports that they prepare, which they've done a great job, is good indication as to what you should be looking at.
Judy?
So while that's true what you said, the purpose of them coming to us for a special use permit is for us to have the ability to approve some and deny others.
Right.
And that could be based upon the surrounding area that is different, significantly different than somewhere else.
Absolutely.
So it's not willy-nilly, it is specific to each
Right.
one. And that's why we make people come
Yep.
to us for a special use permit, as well as for variances, different things, putting up a certain type of barn, not a barn, but a building, and allowing certain types of businesses to run in certain types of zoning codes. So that is why. So we do have the ability to make the decision that we want to approve some and deny some, and that's fine, because solar company would just run on to the next landowner in a different area and get them to sign a lease.
State your name, please.
My name is Dorothy Margraf. I live on Egyptian Trail, which is a road between Pauling and Offner. And just on Timberlane is it's off of Egyptian Trail, which is right in the area that the solar farm is projected to be. I am talking in terms of one major thing, and that is government transparency. You are extremely powerful. You are an extremely powerful group who is making a decision where there has been total lack of government transparency on the matter. We are talking about a parcel that is going to have 7,468 large solar panels on it. We are talking about construction in that area which will disrupt traffic all over that entire area. I have videotaped WPAL meetings for WPAL of the Bonny Township for years. The last one I taped was in April. The mayors of the 3 towns decided almost abruptly to cut and stop the cable station which has been covering Beecher, Monique, and Peatone for almost 30 years. I did not hear anything about the solar panel farm at the April meeting. Their Boney Township resurrected a planning committee that had been dormant for a very long time. There was a meeting of the planning committee that others were not made aware of, and this farm was brought to the township with hardly anybody in the audience. I don't know if anyone was really in the audience. Hardly any people come to these meetings. And it was brought and passed at one meeting on the basis of a package presented by the organization making the proposal. The second solar farm, I found out that there was a planning committee meeting, the second of the resurrected committee, and the public was not invited to speak at it at all. The presentation was just made by the planning committee. I videotaped it as a private citizen. The planning and zoning committee meeting for Will County was taped by a man who does it as a private citizen. There is interest in what is going on. There was 126 views of the planning and zoning meeting on the video that he provided. I think that government transparency is needed. If this kind of government transparency had been done when the airport was proposed, it would have been a major scandal. It wasn't. There were many, many meetings. There was people videotaping the meetings of the community, worried about the plans for the airport for a long time. This solar farm was ZIP, went through 7,468 solar panels, disrupting an entire area, creating all kinds of environmental problems. I learned about it 8 days ago, and I am in the area. I have done a tremendous amount of research, also by going on the internet and finding out about the problems that have been encountered across the country, and problems even locally, in Kankakee County, for instance. You are a very, very powerful group who are making a decision which affects many, many people, and there has been lack of transparency. I would suggest that there be more transparency before this solar farm is allowed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other residents want to speak on this? Would the petitioner come down and try to address some of the concerns? Go ahead. State your name, please.
Hi, my name is Louis Sloan, and I'm the property owner. I wanted to talk to you a little bit before the company does. We own the property, and we would like to use it for some sort of legal and productive purpose. It's currently not generating any income for us or the county. It was for sale for a long time before we bought it. We evaluated various options, and in our opinion, the solar farm was the least disruptive and most low impact and the most environmentally friendly option we could come up with, as opposed to things like, say, a commercial building or a warehouse or a cell tower, wind tower, gas station, those sort of things. We felt the solar opportunity would be the lowest impact. As someone stated earlier, it had been in CRP for many years, and that's the reason for the trees. It's not currently in CRP now and hasn't been in for CRP for a few years. So if we're going to use this in a productive fashion, I'm afraid the trees are probably going to have to be removed anyway for whatever we use it for. It was for sale for a long time. Raccoon Grove had ample opportunities to add to their footprint, didn't buy it, and and correct me if I'm wrong, the company people can correct me if I'm wrong, I apologize if I'm wrong, but I believe Raccoon Grove gave their blessing to the project and is very excited about the project. So that's pretty well all I have.
Thank you. My name is Mike Barkowski with Community Power Group. I'm the applicant from Adams Street, Chicago. I just do want to touch very quickly on the landowner's comments, which is he was extremely thoughtful in the property. This was an investment property for him. It's not currently being farmed. And we went through a lot of due diligence and understanding of the options. As you know, this is right on a pretty main highway. It's not going to be developed for residential purposes. Just a short couple blocks up the road, there's commercial activity already, and as I'm sure Monet expands, this would be an appropriate place for commercial activity to continue to go. And so when he looked at this and he thought, you know, and we talked extensively before he ultimately purchased the property, which again wasn't that long ago. We kind of signed the lease at basically the same exact time he purchased it. And the idea was, you know, here we have this farm and we're going to go through our landscaping in a minute. We're going to go through some of the environmental concerns because I think there's a lot of misnomers out there about solar and the different technologies, and some of the things tonight are really not applicable for this solar facility. And so once you take into account the landscaping and the fencing and how the land is ultimately going to be used, it's not going to be bulldozed, we're going to keep it at its existing contours. We find that it is very environmentally friendly, and I think that is one of the reasons why the Raccoon Grove gave us a letter of support. And I would imagine it's probably a lot more environmentally friendly than the 4 or 5 tree stands are that are right at the edge of that property. I would imagine we do a lot less damage to animals with a solar facility in which those activities won't be permitted. So just real quick on this, I don't know if you can see it. It's a little bit of a balance here. We're trying to figure out how to make this work. Maybe I'll hold it, or Nick, maybe you could help me. Some of this members, and we go to the board right here, so we're going to have to, you'll have to do a little Vanna White action over there. Okay. So we, you know, some of this the staff members addressed with regard to noise, and you'll see here, you know, that the estimate of noise coming from inverters is approximately 65 decibels. But there is a, you know, a halving effect of that noise. I think in the last meeting that we went to, I gave a particular analogy that a dishwasher is approximately 65 decibels. And if you're in the kitchen, you know, you can kind of hear it, right? And you're talking, it's you know it's there. But as soon as you go into the next room, you probably don't know that the dishwasher's on. And as soon as you go outside into your yard, I can assure you, you definitely don't know that it's going on. And so at 64 feet away from an inverter, the inverter noise, the human ear, is the same as a quiet rural area at night. And what we're talking about is that this solar facility is, as I'll show you in a minute, it's more than 1,000 feet away from any resident. There will be zero noise impact. I can guarantee you it'll be wildly less than the highway it is next to. As far as EMFs go, you know, that was a concern that was raised earlier. Solar facilities, the only thing that has any real EMF on it is your inverter. And by the way, these solar facilities are wildly less on the EMF front than your normal distribution lines that are right out there in front of your house. But nonetheless, I will go through this. If you look, you have a microwave at 1 foot. if you always tell your kids, hey, get away from it, right? But it's actually true. 1 foot, you have an EMF of 2,000. And then as we work our way down, we have things like welding at 10, a vacuum cleaner 3 to 4, a computer at 3 feet is 2 to 5. A fluorescent lamp at 3 feet is 0.15. You get all the way down to an inverter, which you put at the center of the facility. You get 50 feet away from it, and due to the halving effect that the staff talked about earlier, it's actually 0.2 to 0.4. And that's for a 500 kW inverter. Our inverters are actually 125. So once you take that out to 1,000 feet, there's absolutely zero impact. And those wire lines that are going into somebody's house are wildly more impactful than any solar facility. We've also heard a little bit about runoff. And so we found this interesting picture, kind of shows what a regular farm is the majority of the year, where it's fairly vacant. And we here have a solar farm, right? And so a solar farm actually is going to have grass cover on it all year. And it's going to be absorbing all the water without loose soil running off. Sometimes we hear people talk about a drip line off of solar. That is with a fixed tilt facility, where you have 2, 3 facilities on a fixed tilt basis. These are single access panels. And so these single access panels, unless it rained at exactly the same time, every single day, like it's always going to have a different pitch and a different angle. And that's why you get a lot more growth under these panels than you would in a fixed tilt system. So I just wanted to address a couple of those high-level points. The next, which is really, really interesting and really, really important, is we hear of these toxic chemicals inside solar panels. And if you go to Google and you say toxins, solar panels, there's the first thing that pops up is how cadmium is inside solar panels, and it is a toxin, and it's terrible, and it's dangerous. And as a developer, you Google that, you're like, oh my God, this is bad, right? But then you read and you say, that's a thin film technology. It is a very specific type of solar PV that is not being used, certainly on our projects, not in most Illinois projects. As a board, I would be asking every one of these project developers, do you plan on using thin film? We've seen other areas that say, no thin film allowed. It's within their ordinances. And it might be something that you want to consider. Crystalline does not have any of that. There are a limited amount of toxins that are used in the manufacturing process, no different than the toxins that are used in a computer or a cell phone that kind of cleanse the material and then get recycled on site to use again and again. But there's nothing inside these panels that pose that type of risk, period. And these are the types of panels that our development company has put in places like Shirley, Massachusetts, where Fort Devens is, where we have about a 70-acre facility that is sitting directly on top of their water reserve. They wanted it because it's a big open land that they do nothing with. It just sits there, and so they leased it to us. And there was all sorts of studies done at all different Massachusetts Institute of Technology and others, and this is in and operating for several years now. After numerous studies, it is on top of that city and locale's water supply, and without risk, all sorts of studies associated to it. So that is real, live, actionable research that's been conducted. The other thing that we had posed and we had talked to the staff, and actually some of the neighbors about as well, is originally the way the code formulaically works is that they wanted to have some screening along Route 50, as well as up to the north up here. And because the way the ordinances worked, it wasn't required here because it was so far away from the neighbors. You got to remember, this house over here, almost 2,000 feet, 1,800 feet away. That house, again, 1,800 feet away from the inverters. So what we were proposing and asking as a part of our special use permit, that even though it's not required to have a screening, we think it should be here because if you are driving down this road, you can see it. And even though it's not required, we think it's appropriate. Along the southern border as well, and along this tiny little slip right here. Starting right here, all along this highway, is a 3 to 5 foot berm with tons of existing vegetation on top of it. It would be an absolute shame for us to tear all that down just to put up new vegetation. And the way the topography works, you'd never be able to see it from this direction. Also, way up in the back, there is a basically 10-foot hill that goes all along here. And there's, this is obviously Raccoon Grove, so there's 500 acres worth of, screening that's right there. We think that would be wasted. We'd rather invest that money in this part of the project and provide meaningful, coverage. Here's just a quick picture. You can see an individual standing on Route 50 right here. Kind of shows where that berm comes up and how much higher above that the existing vegetation is. This is a topography of the northern end of the facility right here. And you can see it goes from like 724 up to 734, and then it comes down slightly again right here. This is an outline of where that solar facility would be. So it's almost like there's a little indentation in the middle of that field right there, providing a natural buffer zone. And you can see, the solar facility in this picture would be kind of way off in here. It's actually pretty far in there. We just stood out in that field. You can see an individual right there and how the field comes up from there. And you got to remember, the solar panels, they're only 7 feet high at their highest. At average, they're about 4 to 5 feet high. And then just during the middle, at the ending or beginning of the day is when they're kind of pivoted up. And that actually won't be 70 because that would be at a 90-degree angle and we'll never be that far. So they're not very high objects. That's our next facility. Briefly talk about that. Here we wanted to provide a little image of what's actually happening. So similar to the AIMR that we've discussed, the state also had another law, and it's around pollinator-friendly ground cover. Similarly, that is not applicable to us. We have adopted that seed mix as a part of our plan. So this field will put in it a pollinator mix that is in accordance with the law that was passed or being considered at the same exact time as the AIMR law, which that too we would be willing to ascribe to and commit as a part of our special use, that we will adhere to the requirements of that even though we don't have to. The other thing that we are doing at other facilities at the request of neighbors is rather than use a chain link industrial fence, again, I want to stop back. Some people made some comments earlier about this being an industrial scale solar facility. This is not an industrial scale solar facility. It may sound like a lot of, solar panels, but if I were to tell you how many cement blocks were in a manufacturing facility, you'd probably be overwhelmed, right? It's just not that. It is a community solar garden described by the state law to be inside communities. And so as a part of that, we'd like to keep that community feel. And rather than have a chain link fence, we'd like to use a farming fence that provides some more of the natural elements and a bit more see-through. And this is something that Raccoon Grove folks also liked in their, giving us their recommendations, that we would use a fencing system like this. This is an example of the screening right here. It'll be planted at approximately 4 feet, grows 6 to 10 feet in height, and it'll be intermingled with this. It's a Wentworth American cranberry bush, again planted at about 4 feet, grows to 10 to 12 feet. I think you'll find we're probably one of the only organizations out there. I know people have challenged our ethics, but we're probably one of the only organizations that actually work with nurseries up front to look at the soil types to see what types of things will be surviving and will do well out there. Some people have talked about property valuations. And Cone Resnick is a fairly large consulting firm, and they're one of the few organizations that have actually done studies on the value impact of solar. And so I pulled out a couple little snippets for you, as well as none other than a screenshot of Zillow from within the last couple days, because I think it's really important to be able to see this. So what Cone Resnick did, this is a 140 acre, so this is a very large industrial scale solar facility, similar area outside of Indianapolis, okay, just outside city limits where you have kind of homes and agricultural being intermixed. What they did is they looked at, they looked at a residential area right here. This is, it's hard to see, you'll see it in the next one. The solar facility is right here, 140 acres. There was a residential area right here and a sister development right here, although it's all fairly similar. They did a study of the home values of sales in those two neighborhoods, and what they had a controlled sale area of non-adjoining solar farms, and it ended up being $57 price per square foot, whereas the solar farm area was $59.81. And that was just their independent analysis. But to challenge that and take that to a step further, if you go to Zillow today, right? I mean, we don't have to go too far to research all that. You can look at Zillow. This is the solar farm right here. These are, first of all, there's not one home for sale in this neighborhood. Not one. There's a home for sale up in this neighborhood, but none adjoining. There have been a number of sales. These are all sales since the solar facility has been in. And what you find is down here, you know, 135,000, 160,000, 132, 140, you know, 118, 120, 113. And actually, the prices go down the further away from the solar facility you get. And they're very similar, actually a little bit higher than the neighboring neighborhoods. One would suspect if there was a material impact, one, Cone Resnick wouldn't be willing to issue a report, and two, at a minimum, you would see these homes right here decreasing in value. And this is something anybody in this room can go look at Zillow today for themselves. But if that wasn't enough, the thing that Cone Resnick really pointed out is here you have the solar facility. It's hard for you to see, but it's a Google image. And you can go right onto Google Earth yourselves, and you go to this solar facility. This is in 2013 when the solar facility was being built. You can see it starting construction right there. And there's this big open field right next door. It's a separate owner, separate field. Now let's roll the clock forward. And we're going to roll it to 2016. The solar facility is complete. This is a very small piece of it. It's huge. Somebody built a $500,000 home with an in-ground pool within 150 feet. Okay? Let's take a look. Here's the field before it was built, as it was being built. Someone bought it. One of the nicest homes in the area. Only home with a huge in-ground pool, 150 feet away from that solar facility. And that's just going onto Google Earth to take a look at that for yourselves, or Zillow. And I think that's it. So I'm hopeful that we were able to address your concerns. We truly appreciate that anything new, there's lots of questions, but we do think that this is a very thoughtful and meaningful use of that property. And the reason people like solar farms is because they're not noisy, or neighbors, they don't pollute, they're not noisy, they just sit there and it's open land. And that's a pretty good neighbor to have. And so, as you review that, I hope you're, and consider, I hope you're able to take away some of this kind of third-party information with kind of very specifics as to what we're going to be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions by committee? Okay. Thank you.
So I have some comments to make to the residents. So Many of you know me because I live very close to you. I live off of Will Center between Offner and Eagle Lake Road. And so as a board, we're stuck with making decisions that actually have the best interest of our residents. While I agree with you that it's right next to Raccoon Grove, it would be good if the Forest Preserve would buy the land. Right now, we all sit on the Forest Preserve, we don't have any money to buy any land. I'm guessing that the impetus to this man purchasing the property that had been sale and not sold for a while is because he had talked with the solar company, he's going to get some additional money that you wouldn't get if you were just farming it. But the problem comes in is if you look, I would, and I haven't looked, but I would guess if you looked at the long-term planning for the area, because it's right on Route 50, I'm imagining the long-term planning would be commercial, is my guess. So if that's the long-term planning on it, it would be something that the board might consider putting in a actual commercial use, which would be much more invasive than a solar farm. So it becomes very hard, because I agree with you guys, I wouldn't want to live across the street from it, except for the fact that it doesn't make any noise, it isn't going to pollute. We've put many, many restrictions on it. This has been a very open process. We have had, I don't know how many different reports in the newspapers, and this has gone on since, when did we do Cypress Creek last fall? September. A long time. It hasn't been out in your area, which is why I have asked for land use to put together a white paper, but I believe they're at least updating our website. I don't know if that's completely done yet to show what that is. So it's really a hard decision here, because I agree the site location is not appropriate. I think it should become part of Raccoon Grove. That would be the ultimate thing. We've not had a conversation as to what would be suitable or not suitable. Problem is, it's right along Route 50. Route 50, I'm sure, if you look at all of the long-term planning, that would all be zoned commercial. The hard thing is, you got to think, would you like a different type of commercial thing there, which is very much more invasive, could be very loud, could be having trucks going on and off, or community solar, which would be, you're not going to have any of that. You're going to have trucks in that while it's being built. Once it's done, that would be taken care of. You have the increased assessed value of the solar community, which should help with property taxes. It's a very hard thing. I understand exactly what you're saying, and I know many of you sitting out there came to speak before us today. We have not had a conversation on density. We've not had a conversation on suitability of a certain location over other locations. And like I said, I don't know, I have not looked at the planning of Mooney Township to see what it is, if it would be zone commercial. I'm guessing it would, because it's right on Route 50. It is in the ultimate footprint of the airport, but as we know, the inaugural footprint hasn't been built. So for this landowner to come in and purchase this property, he probably is guaranteed for 40 years or whatever, and the solar company might be there getting that increased revenue that he wouldn't be getting. So it's a hard decision. I gotta, have you guys think about what the potential could be to be approved if it weren't a solar farm. So I just want to put all that out there as far as what conversations we've had at this board, the potential of what property would be along a highway like Route 50, what the uses could be. That's a very difficult thing. So I just want to make those comments.
I'll be brief. And I'm right on board with you on this. Because I voiced this at the last meetings that, and it is a difficult decision, you guys, okay? I mean, you have no idea how hard this is, because I understand what you're saying, but what Judy pointed out to you is a fact. If this doesn't come in here, they're going to put something in their commercial. And that's pretty much how it's going to work out. I also, Judy knows how I feel, I totally support homeowners' property rights. Totally. If someone approaches a solar farm and wants this put on their land, that's their choice to do that. My big thing is, and I've told Judy this too, There's not a lot of families left, like Judy's, that hang on to their farmland. The kids come in or other people buy them, and then it's gone. And the people that have come in that have wanted to put these in, they want to keep the land in the family or keep it as natural as possible. This is the best solution. It helps with tax dollars. Again, I don't want to see something else there, but I also have to support the person that owns the property. So Judy and I are pretty much in line with this one. I live out in the area too, and I actually live right around the corner from the one in Crete. And for me, this is an industrial. It's not going to put stress on our infrastructure, which will cost the taxpayers money. Just the interim time of when they're putting it in will be about the most traffic. And unless I'm wrong, they come out twice a year to do any type of maintenance unless something else happens and to clean them. They're planting natural grasses underneath it. The one on Goodnow Road is right next to the forest preserve, such as Raccoon Road. And they're embracing this because they see what's coming down in the future. I don't like where the future's been going so far. This to me is a good thing. I have 4 grandkids. This is about them. This is about my kids. We've done a poor job of keeping things under control, and I feel this is probably one of the best ways to secure the future for them.
Judy?
One thing I did not say earlier, because we've had these conversations for months now, is that one thing that land use requires as part of putting a solar farm out there is they have to do a drain tile study. And in the drain tile study, that takes a look at all the existing drain tiles. And when we found that they are, what at least Borrego was doing on that, we haven't had an exact conversation with that, with this group, Community Solar, is that they're basically going in and redoing all the drain tile, because you can imagine as your chairs are in the audience area there's a chair, that's how the panels would be, so you're going to end up hitting a drain tile. So they do a drain tile study to make sure that, which is part of the ag mitigation agreement, which is the AMA-like document we have, which is attached to this, because there's still this, there's a state AMA now, right? No, not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. So we have our AMA-like document attached to this that they have to follow to make sure that the water flows as it does now. The water coming into the land would be released, and it would not block it from not going through the area. I don't know how the drain tiles are in that area on that specific parcel, but that is something that we make them do. So they have to. If there are no drain tiles, then they would have to put drain tiles in, because we aren't going to have them impede the land at all for farmers on either end or landowners on either end if you have a residence. So those are different things that we've made them do so that they're as friendly as they can be. I'm going to be voting no today simply because we have not had a conversation as a group as to do we want to look at density? Do we want to look at what is a specific good site or not? The problem is, again, this is at Route 50. So my no vote be to have that conversation. Hopefully we have that conversation, especially our caucus, because we haven't had that conversation. It seems as solar farm conversations gone on, there seems to be more and more interest than there was before, such as ComEd. I wanted ComEd to come and speak before us, and I know there was a meeting last week where a couple board members did speak with ComEd, and I attended a meeting last night, so I had a lot of my answers with the ComEd part of it. So you have to keep in mind, too, that just because we have a lease agreement, just because Community Power Solar wants to come and put a solar farm in, that doesn't mean they're actually going to get that credit. They're in a long line with many, many different companies for these dollars. So this is all just a risk they're willing to take. Obviously, it must be economically feasible for the company to look into doing this. So, all right, just wanted to make those comments.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned before about the change in the law. Should we make an amendment to include that as a condition? Can you cut and paste that?
You already have the AMA link. To add to the AMA document? So there is already condition number 9. Jessica said that is that AMA-like document we made for Brago. The state one does differ a little bit from it. So if you want to remove that condition and add the new AMA language, or keep that one and then just add or modify it to reflect whatever it is you want to do, you can.
I would like to see, like a side-by-side, you understand what I'm saying? And if it's pretty much similar, that's great. I do not like the last clause that you brought up later on.
With that language removed, otherwise it
Correct.
wouldn't be applicable as a condition.
And just because of the questions, and since we are all trying to be fair here, I would like to table this until we have a clear, as well, I will agree with that.
So you're asking for a side-by-side of the current AMA
Yeah,
like
to see.
to the next AMA like that
Right.
reflects
Unless-
legislation.
Unless there's not a big huge difference, do you understand what I'm saying? I just want to read it with that last clause taken out. As long as there's
Okay.
not this big, huge change, because it sounds like
We can
they're all...
highlight the differences.
Correct. Okay.
Chairman, I would be, rather than rush this through and for everybody to feel more comfortable with this, I think this one and maybe the next one, so we can put that language in there, give staff enough time to look at all it. I would agree with tabling these two until next month, so I would, if she wasn't, I would second that motion. If you say you want to be a motion, but if you want to make it a motion, I would also second that. I don't want anybody to have to be rushed. I would like, when it gets back to us, for it to be well thought out, well done, so we all can get a grasp on it.
Okay.
And I just hate to see that being rushed, so I would think that would, to bring it
Okay,
back
we have a
next month.
motion and a second to table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Tom,
Yes.
do we have to make a motion to add that language from the state on the one we already passed? I for the full county board, I'm talking. So all of them are, okay, so everything's coming in.
Well,
Not yet.
no, we've already approved some at county board.
Right, that's what I'm talking about, the one that we just,
I don't know. If we go over, if the county board already approved them, Matt, can we amend those or no? No, they've already
that's not what
done.
that
He's
is.
asking the first one that we did.
The one that we just approved has to go to county board first, and then we can ask the county board to bring it back to committee.
right, that's
Okay,
fine.
that's what we have to do, because we.
That's what I was getting at.
That's what I thought you were asking, yeah.
Can I ask one question, though? It'll come just back to committee, not all the way back to planning and zoning commission, correct?
Go back to, yeah, should go back to committee.
And that's it, we don't have to do the other stuff, that's all I wanted to know.
Yeah, the one that won't done.
And then one more thing, obviously, is when we do this side by side, the state may not have something in it that we feel is appropriate in the county, so that we may still have another condition put on these special use permits, so that we can further control it at the county level. The state didn't feel appropriate to do statewide. So we wouldn't just adopt the state one only as possible, we would also have additional conditions for that, just to make that clear.
Okay, the next one is the solar farm on Dixie Highway.
Yeah, I would make a motion to table this one also, for the same reason.
Second,
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Just a moment for comment.
Can I put that regards where I'm at, can I just add my comments to this? before
Sure.
we
Come on
table?
down.
And, there's a lot of uses for someone's property. I'm a firm believer that, you should be able to do what you like. I'm not against solar for any other reason. It's not a bad location, like at a creek or whatever, but it's the sound. And I know we may have heard terms like 65 decibel is similar to a dishwasher. It's also the sound that a bullet train makes that's set at 200 miles an hour. There's difference between 65 within the bandwidths. When you're inside a house, when you're walled off, you walk around the corner, your sound is bouncing off all your interior walls. Think of throwing a pebble into a lake. If there's 3 boats you throw in the middle of, that wave is not going to go anywhere. If you throw in the middle of the lake, those waves will continue out unobstructed. I know that's what a lot of the landscaping is meant to do. But where it comes to this particular site is I don't know if the homeowner across the street had actually got notified. We haven't found, we don't know who he is. They started rehabbing the house and they haven't been around much. I know several people in the area did not get any letters unless you were abutting the property. That house is 400 feet away from the inverter. My house is 600 feet away from the inverter. And the church really is not, he said the next residence to the west is 1,600 feet, but the church is 600 feet. It's not that, I mean, my God, we're getting power from sunlight, something you couldn't even imagine 40 years ago. There's just got to be a little better way of maybe bringing that sound level down, either through, I mean, you go down the expressway, when they get too close to homes, they're putting a barrier. Well, no one wants a big stinking concrete barrier around it. But you have one unit in this facility that originally said on the meeting that it was going to be in the middle of the development. But according to looking on the site with what was filed, it's going to be 100 feet off the street. So the street is going to echo that, carry that sound much better than any other, than the field would. So I don't even know my new neighbor yet, but I'm concerned for him at 400, the church at 6, and me at 6. Like, there should be some standard set for when you're producing that level of sound. You can't put it in a box, but there's got to be some way of just isolating that unit for better sound quality. You go by the airport, homes are soundproof when they're too close to the runway. There's ways around this thing, but there's no provisions to it. And it's like, I would think as the board's moving forward with these solar fields, especially getting closer and closer to residential facilities, that maybe that can be drawn into the discussion. Like 400 feet is close, and it's not a sound you can turn off. I mean, I know there's some solar plants that actually, with batteries, that actually run all night long. I'm glad it's not one of those, but you know, when my dishwasher's making too much noise for me, I can turn it off. Same thing with my TV. But it's still, let's just figure out a solution or make a minimum 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet from the nearest residences. Because right here, you got 3 residences that are within the 600 feet boundary. And I mean, once a church, you got 400 people attending that church for service, that this thing's going to be going full speed. Yes?
Where are you at?
I'm on Corning Road, 156 East Corning Road. I'm directly east of, and I'm the lucky one because actually the grade.
Where is that in accordance to where the radio station is? Where's your home?
We're east of Route 1.
Okay.
So there's a new church that was put up about
Correct.
2007.
Yes.
So they're my one neighbor. The solar field farm will be in the middle. You go over the old railroad tracks. And there's a white house with a circle drive on the north side.
Okay.
So that's my property abuts that property line.
Why am I seeing a Dixie Highway address?
Because the large parcel that they're dividing this small special use out of
Abuts up
runs
to Dixie Highway.
Dixie Highway and Corning. So really, they want to keep all, from what was said the other night, is they want to keep that property available for more commercial use in the future. I understand coming down Route 50, that's what they're saying. I can see that. But up to 2007, Beecher was like within one vote of actually producing, that was all going to be housing. So I mean, the properties have changed. In fact, they went through 3 different development plans, and they were one vote off, and the mayor changed his vote at the last minute, and then the economy fell apart. So the housing part.
So that was a blessing, actually.
It was a blessing, and you know, I hate to sound biased, but I like the idea of a solar farm is going to produce less noise than 200 houses next to it. I'm just saying, let's address existing residences. There should be a minimum footage. 65, I mean, a lot of people don't think 65 is loud, but you know, I go to my mom's house for her to hear TV. It's way too loud for me. So people, their perception of sound is different. It should be a fixed fact, not just what, you know, TV makes or dishwasher or an appliance, because that's a short-term thing. This is a constant, all day, thank God it's not at night. It just should be written into the ordinance we're not going to allow anything within so many feet of a residence without some type of extra buffering to bring that down in like a 40 dB sound, background sound. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one comment.
Another comment?
Yeah, one other comment. I have a 40-second comment. That's it.
Hi, my name is Maria Abney, for the record. I just have one comment, and this was specific to the presentation that Mr. Bukowski gave us on the panels, and he made a comment that there are some limited hazardous toxins or materials, he said, but they get recycled on site. And those are in the meeting minutes and used back in the process. So my question is this: is there a special permit required for having these hazardous toxins on site? Because again, if they're inherent in the panels, what are we thinking about? If there's a storm, if we have an area like some of the sites we've looked at, thousands of trees, and a tree goes flying in a tornado through one of these panels, or if the panel gets lifted up and thrown and scattered on the Moni Reservoir, or on this man's house in Beecher, you know, what are we looking at in terms of those hazardous toxins that get recycled on site as part of the process? And again, that's Mr. Bukowski's words.
I believe he was speaking about in the manufacturing plant of the panels is where those chemicals are used to create specifically thin film panels, which you don't really see, as he said, used in this area.
It would be at the solar farm.
So there's nothing in the panels, so we've gotten a full detail on the panels and all their chemical compositions, as well as all the lubricants that go into moving the panels. So
Great point. I don't have it memorized. What I can do is I can supply that to the committee for the next meeting.
yeah, and I'd love to see that as well. As a private citizen, I like to do my independent research as well. So that's all I have to say is we have to be mindful of what is in these things in the event of a natural disaster in a sensitive area where there's a lot of water, 500 acres of lands and waters on them and drinking water. Thank you.
Thank you.
You said you would supply the name of the solar company that you
Yes,
were
I can do that as well.
Could you do that?
Yes,
Yeah,
I would be
right.
happy to. I'll take that as a follow-up note.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I make one more comment, please?
Sure.
So regarding the noise level, I have two fellow staff members who've been to a 120 megawatt commercial utility scale solar facility who have been standing next to an inverter that is much larger than what would be used on these projects. And I understand if I was a resident, it would be, why should I believe that they don't make noise from someone who's been there? But what I'd like to offer, if the committee is interested, is I can set up a tour at that same facility so you all can see. And I can also put that information on our website. They are very friendly about having residents coming by and looking at the array. It's called Grand Ridge Solar Farm in Streeter, Illinois. Technology is a little different there. They're not trackers because it was built almost 10 years ago now. But it is in the middle of both ag and residential zoned areas. So it's a great example of what we're seeing here. So I'd love to give the residents that opportunity to go there, and also this committee.
Yeah, if you'd make that available to the committee.
Absolutely. County Board Member Dollinger was at that initial tour last year.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion.
Well, I think, shouldn't if the opposition put something forth on the second facility, shouldn't I comment on that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think the couple key things, again, to think about, like you rightfully pointed out, is that those chemicals are actually in the manufacturing process, not in the panels themselves. For crystalline, it's widely available what those composition is, and they are not toxic, nor are there lubricants and attractors and everything like that. They're hydraulic, no different than what a regular tractor would be like. I can assure you the tractor that is working a field is wildly more pollutant than anything on a solar farm, and wildly more noisy as well. And so what I do want to highlight is this facility right here, where that neighbor across the street, as well as there's some neighbors over here directly from the facility, the third facility. So we did stop at both houses. We did talk to both those neighbors. They were excited actually about the potential for discounted power and having a solar facility there rather than, you know, a huge land development. And so that may be the reason they're not here, is because we actually have spoken to them. And so I believe this is the gentleman's house right here, which is more than 1,000 feet away from where the inverter is playing. And again, that's 65 decibels. That is standing right next to it, right? At 50 feet, you can't hear it anymore, right? I mean, you just can't. Never mind 1,000 feet, it's completely gone. And not only that, but I did want to highlight, you know, this is from, and by the way, I did speak to the church this week. And so actually when I spoke to the church numerous times, actually was emailing them the landscape plan and stuff like that over the weekend. And they did ask that we put some landscaping right here. And we agreed to that so that, you know, as you're looking out from the parking lot, there would be a landscape plan. But even with that, you know, I want to highlight here what, you know, I forget, let's just look at exactly, that's about 1,000 feet. So this is standing in the parking lot of the church, okay? In that red circle, I am standing there with my hands up like this. That's 1,000 feet, okay? And so where these existing power lines, which, you know, the hum from that power line has got to be wildly more than the solar farm. But there's a hill that goes up. There is 100 feet of existing vegetation, trees and paths and everything like that between this field and that house. There is a very, you know, I think if I go back, you know, this is 100 foot wide existing vegetation, not to mention a hill that would diffuse it all as well. So I don't want to mislead. And again, these sites, you know, I understand that there may have been somebody leaning towards a no vote, but these sites are very carefully selected to avoid different types of future development activity. I think whoever raised that point is really true. Like on Route 50, you're looking at, you know, within the next 35 years, there will be commercial activity there, right? No. You couldn't get a better neighbor than right here. These guys, by one vote, missed this whole thing being a huge residential area, okay? This is wildly better than that. And the reason they're holding out is we wanted to put it up on the roads. They're like, no way, we want commercial development. We'd like to make this whole thing commercial development. And we said, well, rather than make, because you already have commercial development here. And by the way, right over here, this is already like an electrical manufacturing facility of some sort. I mean, there's trucks going in and out of there, you know, all sorts of vehicles driving in and out of there. But people really, I know it's new to the area, but people really do view these as great neighbors. And so, you know, I would ask that it is very, in that condition to use, okay? We, in that condition, are willing to put in there that will abide by the law that gets approved, as approved, in the future, as a part of our condition of use. And you know, I'd like to pose that to today, so that, you know, there doesn't have to be reflection, there doesn't have to be, we will retroactively, we will enforce that, you know, on ourselves. We will give that power to the county to do that. And this way you don't have to look at language, you don't have to look at everything like that. It just says as a condition of use, you know, they will abide by, you know, they've agreed to abide by the law that gets approved by the state as it relates to AMR. And that is something that we're doing other places. It's not new. It's not different. It doesn't put this huge onerous burden on you all. It just tells that we, with the pollinator friendly as well as this other one, that we will go ahead and do that.
Well, we want to make sure we got the right language in there, that we're not pass something that the state says, well, you don't need to abide by it, but we want to actually put the statements in our position.
Right, and I guess what I'm suggesting, which we've done in other places, is a part of the permit, right? That law may say that will abide, that we are not required. So in the special use, you're basically being able to say, it is approved, provided that, SB, whatever it is, 2814 or something like that, they will abide by that regardless of their ability to waive it, due to that last paragraph. Or that it's retroactively, put on us. Because that's not the issue. We just want to be able to plan and move forward to do things right. Make sure, our shrubbery, it's literally a 12-month lead time to get those types of things involved. To understand the certainty of the projects. So,
thank you.
And that's, and that's why I asked for it to be tabled. I'm not saying a no vote because I know where my heart is, but I also need to listen. And I encourage you to please, if she gets this set up, you need to come up and see that is fact-based, that is hands-on, something you can see. I want you to do that. I grew up in that area too, you guys. I'm an original child of the corn, okay? That's what I call myself. But I see where development has gone, and to me, again, I'm going to repeat it for the future. I think this is a good thing, but I want you guys to have a better grasp myself as well.
right, and our project will be different in that the fencing will be much better than the chain link fence they have there. We're going to have better screening, better vegetation, and the technology is a much different, lower profile technology.
All right, we have a motion on the floor of the table. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, we have outdoor lighting text amendment.